In the long history of the world, only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hour of maximum danger. I do not shrink from this responsibility. I welcome it.
Welcome to this episode of Musings of a Cigarette-Smoking Man. I'm Stephen Leake, where we embark on a journey through time to uncover the vibrant history and enduring legacy of rock and roll. This musical genre is more than just sound. It's a cultural movement that has shaped generations, created new social paradigms, and provided a universal language for expression and rebellion. Whether you're a lifelong fan, a curious listener, or someone seeking to understand the pulse of modern music, this episode aims to immerse you in the roots and resonance of rock and roll. The origins, where rock and roll began. To truly appreciate rock, we need to rewind to the early 20th century, to a period of musical experimentation and cultural cross-pollination in the United States. Rock and roll didn't simply appear overnight. It was born from a rich blend of African American blues, Southern gospel, country music, and rhythm and blues. These styles carried their own stories, hardships, and celebrations that coalesced into what we now identify as rock and roll. One of the most critical influences came from the blues tradition, rooted deeply in African American experience. The blues' expressive vocal style and its characteristic 12-bar structure created emotional depth and storytelling in music. Meanwhile, country and western music, with its roots in Appalachian folk traditions and rural storytelling, added a melodic and narrative layer to these sounds. Rhythm and blues, a genre that gained popularity in the 40s, contributed driving beats and energetic performances that captivated audiences across racial lines. Its electrifying energy, the combination of bluesy melodies, country twang, and rhythmic drive that laid the foundation for early rock and roll. Key milestones and musical pioneers. In the late 1940s and early 50s marked the official rise of rock and roll as an identifiable genre. Artists like Chuck Berry, Little Richard, and Fats Domino brought the sound to national audiences, blending infectious rhythms with electrifying guitar riffs and rebellious lyrics. Chuck Berry's storytelling about youth culture and fast cars, coupled with his innovative guitar playing, set new standards. Little Richard's flamboyant performances and powerful voice challenged norms and ignited stages across the country. Simultaneously, the legendary Elvis Presley burst onto the scene. Presley's charismatic mix of country, gospel, and rhythm and blues helped catapult rock and roll into the mainstream, captivating teenage audiences and breaking down racial barriers in music composition. I love this early rock history. Just to think about the 40s and 50s as a cultural phenomenon of like drive-throughs in the cars of the era and like burger joints and stuff. But rock and roll was more than just the sum of its sounds. It became a symbol of social change and cultural rebellion. In post-war society, experiencing rapid transformation, rock and roll spoke to youth hungry for identity, freedom, and change. It challenged existing social orders, from racial segregation in audiences and venues to the rebellion against parental and societal expectations. The cultural and social impact of rock and roll. Rock's influence went beyond music charts. It played a significant role in the civil rights movement by bringing together diverse audiences and spotlighting African American artists who would otherwise might have remained marginalized. The genre fostered a sense of unity amidst the tensions of racial segregation. Beyond the 50s, rock and roll evolved alongside society. The 60s and 70s saw the genre widen in scope, with the British invasion led by bands like the Beatles and Rolling Stones, psychedelic rock explosions, and the birth of hard rock and punk. Each movement reflected the social realities of its time, from political protest and anti-war sentiment to the push for individualism and nonconformity. Even today, rock echoes in contemporary music, influencing everything from pop to hip hop. Its legacy is seen in how music addresses culture, identity, and political voices. The genre's spirit lives on in the creative drive of the musicians and the fans who keep its energy alive. Why rock and roll remains influential today. So, what is it about rock and roll that endures its longevity? Partly, it's the genre's raw energy and emotional honesty. Unlike polished and manufactured music trends, rock and roll draws from a place of real human experience, struggles, joy, love, and defiance that resonate deeply with listeners across generations. Moreover, rock and roll established foundational musical techniques, from electric guitar solos to drum patterns, that continue to inspire musicians worldwide. Its DIY ethos, especially evident in later punk and indie scenes, which I personally am a part of, encourages anyone to pick up an instrument and make their voice heard. Especially today with AI and the internet and what I've done, anybody with just $20 for an AI subscription can make their own album art and record with open source software and a $20 microphone from Walmart. Rock's ability to evolve while remaining recognizable keeps it relevant. A new subgenre and fusion style constantly emerges, proving rock and roll is not frozen in time, but a living, breathing art form. And importantly, its cultural significance creates a sense of community and shared history for fans and creators alike, setting the stage for our exploration. In this podcast, we will dive deeper into the key figures, movements, and moments that have defined rock and roll's journey. We'll also reflect on the personal connections to this powerful genre, sharing stories of how it influences creativity and identity. Along the way, you'll hear about some fantastic musical craftsmanship from bands like Brownie Drums, proudly made in North Carolina, and Brinson Guitars from Greenville, South Carolina, tools that help keep the rock and roll spirit vibrant today. So grab your headphones, settle into a comfortable spot, spark one up, or have an adult beverage, and prepare to travel through time as we unravel the captivating story of rock and roll, a story that continues to shape the culture and our lives in profound ways. The origins and early icons of rock. Stepping back into the mid 20th century, we find the fertile ground from which rock and roll sprang forth. As we touched upon earlier, it wasn't an immaculate conception, but a vibrant confluence of existing American musical forms. In late 1940s and the early 50s, a planned period, a period of immense social and cultural transition in the United States. Post-World War II prosperity brought about changes in lifestyle, particularly for teenagers who were beginning to form their own distinct subculture with disposable income and a growing desire for independence from the tastes of their parents. This era saw the increasing popularity of electric instruments and advancements in recording technology, which gave musicians new tools for expression. Radio was a powerful force, though often segmented by race and genre. However, certain adventurous disc jockeys began playing rhythm and blues records for white teenage audiences, sparking curiosity and excitement. It was in this environment that a new sound, energetic, rebellious, and undeniably infectious, started to take shape. It was the birth of rock and roll as a recognized phenomenon. Defining the absolute first rock and roll song or artist is a subject of endless debate among music historians. Was it Jackie Brenston and his Delta Cats' Rocket 88 from 1951, often cited for its distorted guitar sound? Was it Fats Domino's consistent string of hits blending R&B and boogie woogie? Or perhaps Bill Haley and his Comets with their cleaned up country influence sound that broke through to the mainstream white audiences with songs like Rock Around the Clock. While these discussions are fascinating, it's more accurate to see rock and roll as emerging from a pool of talent and evolving sounds, with several key figures solidifying its identity and catapulting it into the cultural stratosphere. Chuck Berry, the poet laureate and guitar architect. If rock and roll needed a blueprint, Chuck Berry drew it up. Born Charles Edward Anderson Berry in St. Louis, Missouri, he was far more than just a musician. He was a keen observer of youth culture and a gifted lyricist. His songs spoke directly to the emerging teenage experience: cars, school, young love, and the desire for freedom. But it was his guitar playing that was truly revolutionary, combining the energy of rhythm and blues guitarists with the showmanship of country performers. Berry essentially invented the vocabulary for rock guitar. His early hits, starting with Maybelline in 1955, were groundbreaking. Maybelline took a country song structure and infused it with a driving rhythm and Berry's signature guitar licks. It became a massive crossover hit, appealing to both black and white audiences, a significant achievement in the segregated music industry of the time. Berry's influence is immeasurable. Consider the structure of countless rock songs: an opening guitar riff that grabs your attention, verses that tell a story, a memorable chorus, and often a guitar solo that builds excitement. This template, largely perfected by Chuck Berry, songs like Roll Over Beethoven, School Day, and the iconic Johnny Be Good, are master classes in economy, narrative, and pure energy. His stage presence, including his famous duck walk, added a visual element that was both entertaining and rebellious. Berry wasn't just playing guitar, he was defining how the electric guitar would function in rock music for decades to come. His clear, ringing tone, his double stop bends, and his ability to make the guitar talk, all of these became essential components of the rock lexicon. Every rock guitarist who came after him, from Keith Richards and George Harrison to Angus Young and beyond, owes a debt to Chuck Berry. Little Richard, the architect of pure energy and performance. If Chuck Berry provided the structure and narrative, Little Richard provided the explosive, unadulterated energy. Richard Wayne Penniman burst onto the scene with a force of nature that was unlike anything heard before. His flamboyant style, thunderous piano playing, and ecstatic gospel-infused vocals were a shockwave that shattered conventional norms. Little Richard's breakthrough hit, Tutti Frutti, released in late 1955, was a sonic declaration of independence, with its nonsensical yet utterly catchy lyrics and a signature wail. The song was pure, exhilarating chaos. It was raw, primal, and utterly irresistible. He followed this with a string of hits like Long Tall Sally, Rip It Up, Good Golly Miss Molly, and Lucille, each delivered with the same manic intensity. Little Richard's performances were legendary. He would pound the piano, stand on it, sweat profusely, and scream with joy and abandon. This level of theatricality and raw emotion was transformative. He didn't just sing songs, he put on a show that demanded attention and participation. His androgynous style and wild presentation challenged the conservative gender norms of the 50s, making him a controversial but endlessly fascinating figure. His influence extends not just to musicians, but to performers. James Brown, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Prince, artists known for their dynamic stage presence, all learned from Little Richard's blueprint of electrifying showmanship. He demonstrated that rock and roll was not just music for the ears, but a spectacle for the eyes and a feeling for the soul. Elvis Presley, the king who mainstreamed the sound. While Chuck Berry and Little Richard were essential pioneers, it was Elvis Aaron Presley who truly brought rock and roll to the masses, becoming a global phenomenon unlike any musical artist before him. Elvis was a masterful synthesis, blending country, gospel, R&B, and blues into a style that would become known as rockabilly. His move from Sun Records in Memphis to the larger RCA Victor label in 1955 marked the point where rock and roll went from a burgeoning niche to a dominant culture force. Elvis possessed an unparalleled combination of talent, charisma, and sex appeal that captivated audiences, particularly young women. His early hits for Sun, like That's All Right, a cover of an Arthur Crudup blues song, showed his ability to blend styles seamlessly. When he hit RCA, songs like Heartbreak Hotel, Hound Dog, originally sung by Big Mama Thornton, and Jailhouse Rock cemented his status. Elvis's impact on breaking racial barriers is complex but significant. While he didn't invent rock and roll, his immense popularity among white teenagers forced the mainstream music industry to pay attention to the sounds and styles originating from African American artists. White audiences who might not have listened to R&B radio were suddenly exposed to music deeply rooted in black traditions, albeit often in a version that filtered through Elvis. However, this also led to instances where white artists like Elvis achieved greater commercial success covering songs by black artists who received less recognition and financial reward. This dynamic highlights the uncomfortable reality, even as it's undeniably helped bridge the gap between segregated audiences. Elvis's performances were controversial, particularly by his hip-shaking movements, which were considered scandalous by many adults at the time, leading to infamous television appearances where he was only shown from the waist up. This controversy only amplified his appeal among rebellious youth, solidifying rock and roll's image as a rebellious force. Other early innovators. While Berry, Richard, and Presley are central figures, the early rock and roll landscape was rich with other talent that contributed significantly. Fats Domino. Antoine Fats Domino Jr. brought a smooth, piano-driven New Orleans sound to rock and roll, with massive hits like Blueberry Hill and Ain't That a Shame. His amiable presence and consistent success helped make the music palatable to a broader audience. Jerry Lee Lewis, the Killer, was another wild piano man from the South. His electrifying performances and hits like Great Balls of Fire and a whole lot of shaking going on embodied the raw, untamed spirit of early rockabilly. Buddy Holly, Charles Hardin Buddy Holly, and his band The Crickets brought a different sensibility, cleaner, more melodic, and pioneering the standard rock band lineup of two guitars, bass, and drums. Hits like Peggy Sue and That'll Be the Day showed a more polished side of early rock, heavily influencing later bands like the Beatles. Bill Haley and his Comets. As mentioned, Haley's rockabilly sound was crucial in bringing the music to white audiences just before Elvis. Rock Around the Clock became an anthem for the rebellious youth depicted in the film Blackboard Jungle. These artists and many others were forging a new path, blending sounds, challenging conventions, and creating music that resonated deeply with a generation eager for something of their own. Their styles, performances, and groundbreaking songs laid the essential groundwork for everything that rock and roll would become. Social significance and blending barriers. Beyond the music itself, the rise of these early icons had profound social implications. Rock and roll became the soundtrack to the burgeoning youth identity, a symbol of independence and a break from the conservative values of the post-war establishment. Parents often viewed the music, its performers, and its fans with alarm, fearing its perceived vulgarity, rebellious themes, and wild behavior it seemed to inspire. Perhaps most significantly, rock and roll played a role, however complex and sometimes fraught, in challenging racial segregation. As mentioned with Elvis, the music crossed racial lines in a way few cultural phenomena had before. Black artists' music reached white audiences, and white artists openly drew inspiration from black forms. While venues were often still segregated, the music itself created a shared experience. Package tours, though rare and controversial, sometimes featured mixed race lineups, exposing audiences to a diverse range of talent. The energy and authenticity of artists like Chuck Berry and Little Richard, rooted deeply in the African American experience, were undeniable, even when presented to a white audience. This cultural exchange, though imperfect and marked by inequality, was a crack in the wall of segregation, using the power of music to connect people across racial divides. The early period of rock and roll was a time of raw innovation, fearless performance, and significant cultural upheaval. The pioneers of the 50s didn't just create a new genre, they helped shape a generation, challenge societal norms, and set the stage for a musical revolution that continues to echo today. Their records weren't just hits, they were declarations of a new era, paving the way for countless musicians who would pick up guitars, sit down at pianos, or step up to microphones in the decades that followed, inspired by the foundational sound and spirit of rock and roll. The evolution of rock through the 60s and 70s. All right, picking up where we left off. The 50s laid the explosive groundwork for rock. The sound was raw, exciting, and undeniably American. But as the calendar flipped into the 1960s, the music didn't stand still. It mutated, grew, absorbed new influences, and reflected the seismic shifts happening in society. This was the decade of unprecedented cultural change, political upheaval, and musical exploration, and rock and roll was right at the heart of it, soundtracking the transition from innocence to experience, from conformity to counterculture. The 1960s saw rock and roll explode into myriad subgenres, becoming more sophisticated, experimental, and globally dominant. The 1970s continued this expansion, pushing boundaries in volume, complexity, and raw energy, before a reaction set in that brought things back to basics in a furious burst. Let's delve into these transformative decades. The British invasion, a transatlantic takeover. Just when some in America thought rock and roll might fade or become fully domesticated, a new wave hit the shores, proving the genre's universal appeal and incredible adaptability. From the United Kingdom came bands who had grown up listening to these very American pioneers we discussed. Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Elvis, Muddy Waters, Howling Wolf, and countless others. They absorbed these sounds, filtered them through their own experiences, and sent them back across the Atlantic with a fresh energy and style. This was the British invasion. The most iconic and influential band to emerge from this phenomenon, arguably in all of music history, was the Beatles. Starting with their explosive arrival in America in early 1964, Beatlemania was a cultural force unlike anything seen before. Their early sound was rooted in Chuck Berry riffs and Little Richard energy, blended with their own melodic genius and tight harmonies. Songs like She Loves You and I Want to Hold Your Hand were pop perfection, instantly capturing the hearts of millions. But the Beatles didn't stay static. Over the course of the decade, they embarked on an unparalleled journey of musical innovation. They moved from simple pop structures to intricate studio productions, incorporating diverse instruments, experimenting with recording techniques, and writing increasingly complex lyrics. Albums like Rubber Soul, Revolver, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and the White Album weren't just records, they were artistic statements that pushed the boundaries of what popular music could be. They introduced elements of folk, psychedelia, classical music, and avant-garde sounds into the rock format, influencing virtually every band that followed. While the Beatles captured the melodic, pop-friendly side of the Invasion, another band embodied the grittier, blues-infused edge. The Rolling Stones. If the Beatles were the lovable mop tops, the Stones were the rebellious counterpoints, led by charismatic Mick Jagger and their riffmaster Keith Richards. The Stones stayed closer to their blues roots for longer than the Beatles. Their sound was raw, swaggering, and overtly sexual, everything that challenged the conservative norms of the time. Songs like I Can't Get No Satisfaction, Paint It Black, and Sympathy for the Devil had a darker, more dangerous aura than the Beatles' output. The Stones represented the enduring power of the blues as the backbone of rock and roll, proving that simplicity, feel, and attitude could be just as potent as complex arrangements. They became the archetypal rock and roll band, surviving trends and personal changes to remain a formidable force for decades. The British invasion wasn't just the Beatles and the Stones, of course. Bands like the Kinks, the Who, the Animals, and many others brought their own unique takes on the American sound, re-energizing the global music scene and setting the stage for the next phase of rock and roll evolution. Psychedelic rock in the late 1960s revolution. As the 60s progressed, fueled by social change, political unrest, particularly the Vietnam War, and increased experimentation with consciousness-altering substances, rock and roll took a turn towards the psychedelic. This movement wasn't confined to Britain or America. It was a global phenomenon, centered in hubs like San Francisco, London, and other major cities. Psychedelic rock sought to replicate or enhance the effects of psychedelic drugs through music. This led to significant musical innovation, extended song structures, moving away from the standard 3-minute pop song, studio experimentation, using new techniques like tape loops, phasing, and distortion effects, non-traditional instruments incorporating sitars, mellotrons, and orchestral arrangements, lyrical themes, exploring dreams, altered states of consciousness, spirituality, and social commentary. Emphasis on improvisation, especially in live performances, leading to extended jams. Bands like Jefferson Airplane, The Grateful Dead, Pink Floyd, and Cream defined this era, but perhaps the most influential figure to emerge from the psychedelic scene, particularly in terms of playing guitar, was Jimi Hendrix, an American expatriate who found fame in London before conquering the world. Hendrix was a virtuoso who treated the electric guitar not just as an instrument, but as a sound sculpture tool. He pushed the boundaries of feedback, distortion, and effects like the wah-wah pedal, creating sounds that were entirely new and mind-bending. Hendrix's performances were legendary, raw, emotional, and technically brilliant. Whether interpreting the Star-Spangled Banner at Woodstock in a moment of political and musical defiance, or crafting sonic landscapes on tracks like Voodoo Child, Slight Return, or Purple Haze, Hendrix demonstrated the guitar's potential as a vehicle for pure, unadulterated expression. His influence on every subsequent rock guitarist is simply immeasurable. The late 60s were a melting pot of styles: folk, rock, blues, and acid rock, all broadly falling under the expanded umbrella of rock and roll. The music became louder, more complex, and deeply intertwined with the counterculture movement, providing anthems for protest, peace, and individual liberation. Hard rock and the stadium sound of the 70s. As the utopian ideals of the late 60s counterculture began to wane, rock and roll didn't lose its power. It gained weight, volume, and a heavier edge. The transition into the 70s saw the rise of hard rock, a genre characterized by loud, distorted guitar riffs, powerful vocals, heavy drumming, and often blues-based structures amplified to stadium-filling levels. No band better exemplifies the fusion of heavy blues, complex arrangements, and sheer power than Led Zeppelin. Emerging from the ashes of the Yardbirds in the late 1968, Led Zeppelin took the intensity of blues, the inventiveness of psychedelia, and the volume of early heavy rock pioneers, and forged a sound that defined the decade. Jimmy Page's innovative guitar work, Robert Plant's soaring mythological vocals, John Paul Jones' versatile bass and keyboard playing, and John Bonham's foundational thunderous drumming created a chemistry that was unmatched. Led Zeppelin's albums, from their self-titled debut to masterpieces like Led Zeppelin IV and Physical Graffiti, showcase incredible musical depth and stylistic breadth. They could deliver crushing riffs, Whole Lotta Love, Kashmir, intricate acoustic folk, Stairway to Heaven, Battle of Evermore, and dynamic blues epics, Since I've Been Loving You. They were pioneers in using the studio as an instrument, and their live performances were legendary for energy and improvisation. Hard rock became a dominant force in the 1970s, paving the way for heavy metal. Bands like Black Sabbath, Deep Purple, AC/DC, and later Van Halen built upon the foundation laid by Led Zeppelin and others, exploring heavier sounds, darker themes, and pushing the technical limits of their instruments. The 70s rock landscape also included the rise of arena rock, progressive rock, bands like Genesis, Yes, Rush, expanding complexity even further, and the continued evolution of blues rock, solidifying rock and roll status as a premier genre of popular music. Punk rock, the reaction and the return to rawness. By the mid-1970s, rock and roll, particularly in its hard rock and progressive forms, had become big business. Albums were sprawling, songs were long, production was slick, and rock stars often seemed distant and indulgent. As a reaction to this perceived excess, complacency, and technical virtuosity, a new, raw, and urgent movement emerged, punk rock. Punk was a deliberate rejection of the perceived pretension of mainstream rock. It was about simplicity, speed, aggression, and a do-it-yourself ethos. You didn't need to be a virtuoso musician. You just needed something to say, and the energy to say it loud and fast. The aesthetic was stripped down, often confrontational, and rooted in urban grit. While punk exploded in the UK, with bands like the Sex Pistols, The Clash, its American roots are undeniable. One of the most important pioneering bands was the Ramones from Queens, New York, with their leather jackets, mop-top haircuts, a nod to the early Beatles, perhaps, and songs that rarely broke the 2.5-minute mark. The Ramones delivered short, sharp bursts of pop-influenced, high-energy rock and roll. Songs like Blitzkrieg Bop, I Want to Be Sedated, and Beat on the Brat were simple, catchy, and played at breakneck speed. The Ramones distilled rock and roll back to its essential elements: driving rhythm, basic chords, relatable, or sometimes absurd, lyrics, and undeniable attitude. They proved that volume and speed could be just as impactful as technical complexity. While not initially achieving massive commercial success, the Ramones became hugely influential, particularly in the UK, inspiring the bands that would ignite the British punk explosion and subsequent waves of alternative indie rock. Punk was more than just music, it was a cultural movement that valued authenticity, challenged authority, and created its own scene of independent labels, venues, and fanzines. It brought back a sense of danger and rebellion that some felt had been lost in the corporatization of mainstream rock. Though its initial wave was relatively short-lived, punk's impact was profound, clearing the path for new genres and attitudes that would define the music of the late 70s and beyond. Musical innovation, cultural revolution, and global reach. Looking back at the 60s and 70s, the story of rock and roll is one of relentless innovation and expansion. Musicians weren't content to repeat what came before. They experimented with new instruments. Synthesizers became more common in the 70s. Studio technology became increasingly sophisticated, multi-track recording effects, and songwriting evolved dramatically, ranging from the concise narratives of the early 60s to the epic song styles of progressive rock and the raw, minimalist statements of punk. Culturally, rock and roll was a mirror and a catalyst for change. It was a soundtrack to the civil rights movement through its integration of black musical forms, the anti-war protests, the sexual revolution, and the push for individual expression. Fashion, language, and social attitudes were all shaped by the artists and fans of rock and roll. It provided a sense of community and identity for young people navigating a rapidly changing world. The genre's reach also became truly global. While the 50s saw American rock influencing other countries, the 60s and 70s saw a vibrant exchange, with bands from Britain, Europe, and elsewhere adding to their unique perspectives and sounds, solidifying rock and roll status as an international language. From massive stadium tours to small, sweaty punk clubs, rock and roll reached broader audiences and occupied a central place in the cultural landscape. The 60s and 70s were arguably the most fertile and transformative decades of rock and roll. The journey from the simple structures of the early 60s British invasion bands to the complex sonic tapestries of psychedelic and progressive rock, and the sheer power of hard rock giants and the defiant simplicity of punk, is a statement to the genre's dynamic nature. These 2 decades solidified rock as a powerful, adaptable, and culturally significant art form, setting the stage for everything that would follow. The enduring legacy of rock and roll. We've traveled from the raw foundational sounds of the 50s to the explosive evolution of the 60s and 70s, seeing rock and roll transform itself and redefine itself constantly. But what happened after the punk blast cleared the air? Did rock fade, or did its spirit, its sounds, and its core values continue to echo and shape the music and culture that came after? The answer is unequivocally the latter. The legacy of rock and roll is not just in the history books. It's woven into the fabric of modern music and continues to resonate in profound ways. The decades that followed the 70s saw rock and roll splinter into an even wider array of subgenres, but perhaps more importantly, its core elements became assimilated into entirely new musical forms. The energy, the emphasis on expression, the use of electric instruments, and that underlying attitude of defiance and individuality proved incredibly fertile ground for innovation across the entire musical landscape. Rock and roll's imprint on modern genres. While the mainstream dominance of guitar-driven rock might have shifted at various points, its influence is undeniable, even in genres seemingly distant from its roots. Pop music. Pop music has always been adept at absorbing elements from successful genres, and rock and roll is no exception. From the melodic structures borrowed by early pop singers to the adoption of the electric guitar riff and powerful drumming, rock energy has routinely infused pop hits. Think about the power ballads of the 80s, the punk pop crossovers of the late 90s and 2000s, or even the use of distorted bass or guitar textures in modern electronic pop. Artists looking to add excitement, grit, or a rebellious edge often turn to the rock playbook. The showmanship and larger-than-life persona associated with rock stars also frequently find their way into pop performances. Punk's enduring influence, post-punk alternative indie. As we discussed, punk was a reaction, but its legacy was far more transient. The DIY ethos, the emphasis on authentic expression over technical polish, and the willingness to tackle social and political themes directly continued through post-punk, new wave, and laid the groundwork for the vast world of alternative and indie rock. Bands like REM, The Cure, U2, and later Nirvana, Pearl Jam, and the entire grunge movement directly inherited punk's spirit of challenging the mainstream, often while reintroducing musical complexity or drawing from other rock traditions like 70s hard rock for grunge. The indie scene, characterized by independent labels and artist control, is a direct descendant of punk's anti-establishment stance. Metal, the evolution of hard rock. The loud, heavy sounds of the 1970s hard rock didn't just disappear, they evolved into the expansive and diverse world of heavy metal. Bands like Black Sabbath were pioneers. The 80s saw metal explode into a global phenomenon, with bands like Iron Maiden, Metallica, and Guns N' Roses. Metal maintained and amplified the power, distortion, and often the thematic darkness introduced by hard rock. It further pushed technical boundaries on instruments while retaining rock's essential band format: guitars, bass, drums, vocals. Thrash metal, death metal, black metal, progressive metal. Countless subgenres demonstrate the genre's capacity for both crushing power and intricate musicianship, all rooted in the foundation of rock and roll. Hip hop, surprising connections. While seemingly distinct, hip hop shares a surprising amount of DNA with rock and roll, particularly in its early forms and its cultural impact. Both genres emerged from marginalized communities, provided a voice for the voiceless, and became a cultural force for young people. Early hip hop pioneers often sampled rock and funk beats and breaks. Think of DJ Kool Herc using the break from James Brown's Funky Drummer or The Meters. The rebellious attitude, swagger, and lyrical focus on social issues, street life, and identity finds parallels in many rock subgenres, from early rock and roll's defiance to punk protest anthems. Collaborations and fusions became common. Run DMC teaming up with Aerosmith for Walk This Way was a landmark moment, demonstrating the shared roots in rhythm, rebellion, and blues structures. Beastie Boys famously blended rap with hard rock riffs. Even today, many hip hop producers and artists draw from rock textures, samples, and song structures, recognizing the inherent power and energy. Beyond these specific examples, the influence is more subtle but pervasive. The very concept of a band as a unit of creative individuals, the structure of many popular songs, verse chorus form with a bridge and often a solo, the importance of live performance, and the cultural weight given to guitar riffs and drum beats, all of these owe a significant debt to rock and roll. Continuing values, rebellion, and self expression. More than just musical structures, rock instilled a set of values that continue to resonate. The two most prominent are rebellion and self expression. From Elvis's shaking hips and Little Richard's wild performances challenging 50s conservatism to the anti establishment lyrics of punk and the nonconformist attitude celebrated in alternative rock, rebellion has been a consistent thread. This doesn't always manifest as outright political protest, though it often does. It can be a rebellion against societal norms, parental expectations, musical trends, or simply the mundane. This spirit of questioning authority and pushing boundaries is a vital part of rock and roll's legacy and continues to inspire artists across genres to challenge the status quo. Equally important is the emphasis on authentic self expression. Rock and roll, at its heart, is about raw emotion and personal truth, whether it's the heartbreak of a blues based ballad, the anger of a punk anthem, the introspection of an indie track, or the sheer joy of a power chord riff. The genre provides a powerful vehicle for artists to explore and articulate their inner world. The focus on authenticity over polish, on saying something real, continues to be a driving force in music today. Celebrated in singer-songwriter traditions, confessional indie rock, and politically charged hip-hop alike. The ongoing community and cultural footprint. Rock and roll isn't just a collection of songs, it's a culture with a vibrant, ongoing community. The community manifests in various ways. Musical festivals, groundbreaking events of the 60s like Monterey Pop and Woodstock. Rock festivals became cultural touchstones. This tradition continues with massive multi-genre festivals like Coachella, Glastonbury, and Lollapalooza, many of which still prominently feature rock acts, alongside dedicated rock and metal festivals worldwide, like Download or Rock in Rio. These festivals are not just concerts, they're gatherings that reinforce the sense of community and shared passion among fans. Memorabilia and archives. The historical significance of rock and roll is reflected in the value placed on its artifacts. Guitars played by legends, handwritten lyrics, stage costumes, concert posters. These aren't just objects, they are tangible links to cultural history. Institutions like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame preserve this legacy, and collecting memorabilia is a passion for many fans, connecting them to the genre's past. Fan culture and online communities. Long before the internet, rock fans built communities through fan clubs, fanzines, especially in the punk era, and simply gathering at the record store and concerts. Today, online forums, social media groups, and dedicated websites allows fans from around the globe to connect, share knowledge, debate history, and celebrate their favorite artists. This digital community keeps the conversation alive and introduces new generations to the music. Local scenes and tribute bands. On a smaller scale, the spirit lives on in local music scenes worldwide, where new bands form, inspired by the greats. Tribute bands keep the live experience of iconic acts alive for fans who may never have seen the originals. These local manifestations are crucial in nurturing new talent and keeping the energy flowing at the grassroots level. Even in an era where music consumption is increasingly fragmented and dominated by digital platforms, the core elements and cultural impact of rock and roll persists. Its sounds are sampled, its attitudes are adopted, its performance styles are emulated, and its foundational stories continue to inspire. The electric guitar riff remains a powerful symbol. The energy of a live rock band is still an unparalleled experience. The genre's willingness to adapt, absorb, and reflect the times ensures its continued relevance, albeit often in new and unexpected forms. The rebellion isn't always loud guitars. It might be a defiant lyric over a trap beat, or an artist asserting complete creative control. Self-expression isn't limited to poetic verses. It's in the visual representation, the social commentary, the unique blend of sounds. Rock and roll provided a blueprint for how popular music could be both entertaining and culturally significant, how it could challenge as well as comfort, how it could build communities around shared passion and identity. So, while the charts may look different from 1975 or 1995, the echo of rock and roll is everywhere. It's in the attitude of a pop star, the energy of a live show, the raw emotion of a songwriter, the distorted guitar riff that still gives you chills. Its legacy is not static. It's a living force that continues to inspire, provoke, and unite listeners and creators alike. When we talk about the heartbeat of rock and roll, the drums play an indispensable role, driving the pulse, setting the groove, and powering the energy that fuels every great performance. That's why I'm excited to introduce to you Brownie Drums, a remarkable drum manufacturer based right here in North Carolina, where tradition and innovation come together to craft instruments that resonate with musicians of all levels. Brownie Drums isn't just a brand, it's a testament to a time-honored craft, blending classic drum-making techniques with modern precision and sound engineering. Their commitment to quality is evident the moment you experience the warmth and clarity of their drum kits. Every Brownie drum is handcrafted in their dedicated workshop, a place where skilled artisans meticulously select the finest hardwoods, shape shells by hand, and assemble each piece with exacting attention to detail. Under the hood, the Brownie Drums workshop process. In the heart of North Carolina, Brownie Drums Workshop is a harmonious blend of old and new. Traditional woodworking tools and artisan skill meet state-of-the-art precision machinery, ensuring every drum shell is perfectly round and balanced for optimal resonance. The company prioritizes sustainable sourcing, often choosing maple, birch, or mahogany, woods not only known for their beauty but for their superior acoustic properties. These woods are carefully dried and treated to enhance durability and sound quality. Each shell undergoes multiple sanding and coating layers, protecting the drums while allowing them to breathe and protect their rich tone. But it's not just about the wood. Brownie pays special attention to hardware and drum heads, selecting only the best components to guarantee both durability and performance. Their drum kits offer smooth tuning mechanisms and sturdy lugs that stay in place under the fiercest playing conditions. The result? A drum that delivers deep, punchy lows, crisp snare snaps, and shimmering highs that cut through any mix. Appealing to every musician, from bedroom jammers to stage veterans. Whether you're an amateur drummer laying down your first beats, or a seasoned professional performing on festival stages, Brownie Drums has kits tailored to your needs. Their range includes versatile beginner sets with easy tuning and durable finishes, as well as custom high-end configurations designed for studio recording and live performance. One feature that sets Brownie drums apart is their customization option. Musicians can choose from a variety of wood finishes, shell depths, and drum sizes, allowing them to craft a kit that reflects their personal style and sound preferences. On top of this, Brownie offers expert consultation to guide drummers in selecting a set that fits their genre of playing style and environment. Beyond sound and functionality, Brownie Drums stands for the community they nurture. They actively support local music scenes in North Carolina and beyond, sponsoring workshops, jam sessions, and educational programs. Their dedication doesn't stop at building instruments. It extends to building of the culture of musicianship, creativity, and collaboration. If you're passionate about authentic sound and lasting quality, I encourage you to check out Brownie Drums. There's something special about owning a handcrafted instrument made by people who care deeply about their craft and your music. Brownie Drums doesn't just make drums. They create the foundation for the next great groove, the driving force behind the next legendary track. Continuing our celebration of exceptional American craftsmanship in the world of music, let me introduce you to Brinson Guitars, a proud fixture of Greenville, South Carolina for decades. Brinson has earned a reputation for providing expertly handcrafted guitars that embody both tradition and innovation, serving as trusted partners to musicians seeking superior tone and playability. Heritage rooted in artisanal excellence. Founded with passion and precision, Brinson Guitars grew from a vision to create instruments that not only sound incredible, but also reflect the rich musical heritage of the Southeast. Every guitar they produce is a result of the meticulous handcrafting process, combining time-honored lutherie techniques with modern advancements in materials and design. Their artisans carefully select premium tone woods, such as hand-aged mahogany, spruce, and rosewood, to ensure each instrument's distinctive voice and resonance. Vincent's commitment to craftsmanship is evident in every detail, in the precisely shaped neck profiles that balance comfort and stability, to the hand-applied finishes that highlight the natural beauty of the wood grain, preserving clarity and sustain. This painstaking attention to detail extends to the custom hardware and electronics chosen and installed to maximize tonal versatility and reliability, essential for both studio recording and live performances. As we navigate the rich history and vibrant energy of rock and roll, exploring its influence on culture and creativity, it's also important to acknowledge the tools and platforms that foster other forms of creative expression in my own life. One such platform, which has been an invaluable resource for me over a significant period, is allpoetry.com. For nearly 2 decades now, allpoetry.com has served as my primary online poetry workshop. In the solitary pursuit of writing, especially poetry, the need for feedback, community, and a place to share without immediate judgment is absolutely critical. A poem isn't truly finished until it finds a reader, and receiving thoughtful critique is perhaps the most vital step in a poet's development after the initial writing is done. Allpoetry.com has provided that space for me consistently for 20 years. Think about it, 20 years. That's a span that covers seismic shifts in music, technology, and society. Throughout those changes, allpoetry.com has remained a constant presence in my creative process. It's a platform that connects poets from all over the world, offering a virtual space that mimics the best aspects of an in-person writing group with the flexibility and reach of the internet. It's where I've shared raw ideas, polished drafts, and everything in between, receiving feedback that has shaped my perspective and honed my craft in countless ways. The value of the workshop environment. Writing is often a deeply personal and sometimes isolating act. You pour your thoughts, emotions, and observations onto the page, hoping to create something that resonates. But to truly grow as a poet, you need external eyes. You need to know if what you intend to communicate is actually coming across. You need to see where your language is weak, where your imagery is fuzzy, where your rhythm falters, or where you're falling into cliche. This is where the workshop environment comes in. Allpoetry.com's core strength lies in its active and engaged community and its structured critique system. When you post a poem, you make it available to hundreds, if not thousands, of other poets. These aren't just passive readers. Many are there specifically to engage in the craft, to read and offer constructive feedback, and to receive it in turn. Over 20 years, I've read and critiqued thousands of poems on this site, and in doing so I've learned as much about my own writing as I have from receiving critiques online. The process of critiquing others forces you to articulate what works and what doesn't in a poem. It helps you identify common pitfalls, recognize effective techniques, and understand how different choices impact a reader's experience. This critical eye then naturally turns inward, making you a better self-editor. Receiving critiques, while sometimes challenging to hear, is invaluable. It provides perspectives you would never arrive at on your own, pointing out blind spots and suggesting alternative approaches. In this segment, we turn our attention to Monarch Holdings International, a dynamic business entity that plays a quiet, significant role in the creative and entrepreneurial landscape connected to our music and artistic communities. While Monarch Holdings International may not be a household name in popular music circles, its broad business ventures and supportive infrastructure have made meaningful contributions behind the scenes, particularly in fostering innovation and sustainability within creative enterprises. Monarch Holdings International is a diversified company engaged in various industries, including investment management, real estate development, and specialized business consulting. Their approach focuses on blending strategic business acumen with a commitment to supporting ventures that contribute positively to cultural and creative growth. By leveraging resources and expertise, Monarch Holdings helps nurture projects that integrate artistry with entrepreneurship, especially in sectors like music production, creative workshops, and artisan craftsmanship. As we wrap up our journey through the rich history and lasting legacy of rock and roll, it's important to reflect on the profound cultural impact this genre continues to have. Rock and roll is more than just a style of music. It's a powerful force that has shaped social attitudes, inspired countless artists, and given voice to generations seeking individuality, rebellion, and self-expression. Its enduring influence blossoms from the authentic energy and emotional truth embedded in its roots, from the electric guitar riffs and driving drum beats to the stories told through lyrics. Rock and roll remains a bridge across time and cultural divides. It continues to evolve while honoring the past, ensuring that its spirit resonates powerfully in modern music and creative communities worldwide. Equally vital to sustaining this legacy are the artisan crafted instruments like Bounty drums and Brinson guitars. These handcrafted tools embody the meticulous craftsmanship and dedication that keep the authentic sounds of rock and roll alive. Brownie drums, with their North Carolina heritage, and Brinson guitars, proudly made in South Carolina, offer musicians not just instruments, but finely tuned extensions of their creative voice, rooted in tradition and precision. Beyond instruments, fostering creativity requires platforms and tools that empower artistic growth. For over 20 years, allpoetry.com has been a transformative space for writers and poets to workshop, learn, and connect. Its supportive community exemplifies how digital platforms can nurture creative expression, bridge distances, and sharpen craft. Together, the vibrant legacy of rock and roll, the artisan instruments, and the creative resources form a holistic ecosystem encouraging all of us to celebrate music, poetry, and expression in our lives. So whether you're picking up a guitar, pounding a drum, writing a verse, or simply listening and reflecting, remember you are part of this ongoing story, one that honors the past and inspires the future. Keep creating, keep supporting, and keep the spirit of rock and roll alive. Thanks for hanging out with me tonight. It's been fun. I'm the cigarette smoking man. We're gonna win.